Now that we've imported this XML, we've checked our project settings to make sure that the XML matches what we know to be true about the footage in this project. Now we're going to check it against the reference movie that we exported out of Premiere Pro a little earlier in this chapter. I'm going to go ahead Shift-Z just so I can see the entire timeline, and I'm going to jump into the media pool for a second, and I'm going to create a new folder because I want to separate this out from my regular media. It's just an organizational thing. I'm going to add a new folder and call it Reference Movie. And then I'm going to come down to the desktop. I'll jump into exercise files, and I'm going to use the render out of Premiere Pro we did in the earlier movie. But if you don't have Premiere Pro or following along on the exercise files and can't generate the movie yourself, feel free to use the clip we provide in the Reference Scene Detect folder. Now highlight the clip in the media pool, and now rather than adding this as a clip, because this isn't a clip that we want to color correct, this is a reference clip that we want to play against our timeline. And DaVinci Resolve has a special place in its heart for footage like this, and what we're going to do is right click on this clip and select the option Add as Offline Reference. This is going to tell DaVinci Resolve, you know what? We're not color grading this clip. It can't be edited into a timeline. It can't be color corrected in the color page, but we can link it to a timeline. So I'm going to go ahead, add as offline reference clip, and notice this little icon in here, this little kind of checkerboard thing. Let's come up into the media pool. We don't see that. We see little audio icons indicating there's an audio track, but we don't see that little checkerboard. That checkerboard is reserved for what Resolve calls offline reference clips. And by offline, it means kind of like offline editorial as opposed to what we're doing here, which would often be called online editorial or online finishing. So now, having added this as a reference movie, let's jump back into our edit page. Let's come up to our timeline, and I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to go down to the option Link Offline Reference Clip, and look what we've got here. Trust Me -reference. The clip that we just imported into the media pool. I'll select that, and nothing's happened, right? Nothing seems special. But notice here on the source side, there's another checkerboard icon, and if I hover, it tells me offline. So let me go ahead and click on that, and that's our offline reference. Now, they look suspiciously identical. I mean, we don't see a difference between the offline and the conform clip because neither of these have been color corrected, right? They're basically identical to each other. That's actually kind of what we want to see. And the first thing I do is I always check the beginning, middle, and end. I want to find out right off the bat, is there a fundamental problem with the XML that I imported? So what I do is I go to the beginning of the music video, go a couple shots in, and then I'm going to use my up and down arrow on my extended keyboard in order to go to edit points. And I'm going to go to one edit point in any direction and then click the left arrow. That'll take me back one frame. And if they're synced up properly, if the reference clip and my timeline are perfectly in sync, at every cut point I go to, I should see them both identical. And when I go back one frame, there we go. I know the cuts are lined up. I see it looks like the footage is lined up. I'll do the same thing in the middle. Go back one shot. And now I'm going to go back one frame. And there we go. So these frames are lining up. And now let me go to near the last shot. I'll go forward one edit. Now I'm going to go back one frame. And they're lined up. This is a really good sign that I don't have some really weird funkiness right off the bat that's going to kill this conform. So I just confirmed that, generally speaking, we seem to be good edit to edit, shot to shot. But now I want to check every single frame of this timeline against the offline reference. How do I do that? Well, there are a couple tools in here where I right-click on the source window, and when we've got this little box activated and we're looking at our reference movie, I can flip this to different types of wipes. So let's go to a horizontal wipe, and you really can't see anything because nothing's been color corrected. But if I were to take, let's say this shot here, and let's open it up in the inspector tool, and let's just change its opacity to 50%. Close that out. Now you can see that there's a difference. Here's the record side, here's the offline reference, and I can adjust where this wipe happens, and I can cycle through different types of wipes, an angle wipe, and then the mix wipe is one of my favorites because what will happen here is if there's any shot slippage, that'll be completely obvious right off the bat. So let's check the two clips that had the motion effects applied and see, with us in this mix white mode, has there been any slippage? So I'm going to go back a shot. I'm going to hit play. And I'm going to watch this source side. Running a little slow. I'm kind of taxing my system with recording this as well. And I'm wondering if I'm starting to maybe see a little bit of ghosting going on. And there is. Maybe it's a frame out of sync. And then let's go to the next shot. I'll click in the timeline area. Now I'll down arrow key twice. We're into the second shot. And let's see what happens here, which had the speed ramp. Yeah, and we know immediately this is absolutely wrong. You can see the ghosting going on, and that's why I like this mix wipe, because I'm also looking for ghosting, and that'll let me know on speed ramps. It lets me know if the speed ramp is accurate, and it also lets me know if a shot has slipped a couple frames in one direction or the other. Shot slippage can be a little tough to see, let's say, on an angle wipe. You know, this angle wipe may not make it obvious that they're out of sync. So if I click on the timeline again and hit play, and I watch, I've got a wipe going on, not clear that there's slippage there, right? But if I go into the mix wipe, it's clear as day. So what I'm going to have to do is ask the editor to render out this shot as a single QuickTime movie. Then I will edit it back in and drop it in place of this shot. Let's come back in here and let's determine now if there actually is a problem. So I'm going to go ahead, Command+ to zoom in. And we see a little bit of ghosting going on, but that could just be the way that DaVinci Resolve is interpreting the speed ramp. So to test that theory, let's go ahead and click on this clip in the timeline, and now we're going to come up to the inspector. Let's scroll down to the retime and scaling section, and retime and scaling is all about how DaVinci Resolve processes images when doing speed changes, when doing blow-ups and repositions. We're interested right now in retime process. It's set for project settings. What's project settings set for? Come to the editing subtab, look down at frame interpolation. The retime process project-wide is set for nearest. Let's close this down. Let's override it for this particular clip and try frame blend. I'll close the inspector, and now I'll right and left arrow through this. And that hasn't solved our problem. So now we'll select optical flow. And that hasn't solved our problem. So it's not the retime that's killing us. Let's take a look. Maybe it is that the clip has slipped a frame or two. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click in the middle of the clip. And this is how I usually like to solve this problem. I'm just going to take the clip and drag it one frame in one direction. Right now, because magnetic alignment is turned on, I have to turn off this little magnet here. And now it'll let me move just one frame. And now let's go forward and backwards. Nope, doesn't solve our ghosting problem. Let's go back in the other direction. And now let's see what happens. There we go. Now we're locked in. Now that's looking pretty good. I've got a slight ghost there. Very quickly, come out of optical flow, go into frame blend. You can see what the difference this makes. Frame blend, let's jump into nearest. And there we go. Now we're locked on. So Premiere was using the nearest frame blending technique, and somehow or another this clip got knocked one frame out of sync. It's coming in a frame late. If we're not careful, we're going to have a black hole here. So what I'm going to do is just take this shot and extend it one frame. Because I've got nothing else on the front end here. So I'm either going to have to ask the editor to re-render this clip with one extra frame on the head, or if it's okay to simply extend out this shot one frame. Now I'll down arrow, go to the back end here, and I'm just going to have to tighten this up by one frame. And we've now worked on this problem. The other thing we've got to take a look at, I'm going to zoom out, is our blow up. We had a blow up on this particular shot. If I come into the inspector, and you can see I've got some different types of numbers going on in here, but if I turn off the transform, that's the original shot. Let's turn off the clip inspector. You can see the ghosting going on in there. And now let's turn on the clip inspector. We'll turn on the transform, close this up. And so Resolve did a great job taking that frame resizing and applying it to this clip. These are many of the techniques that I use to ensure that the timeline that we import here into DaVinci Resolve is precisely what the editor and the director and the producer and everyone signed off on. Now there's another way we can go ahead and conform a timeline and bypass all of these problems. We will always be absolutely positive that what the editor edited is precisely what we're working with here in DaVinci Resolve. We don't have to mess with offline reference movies or anything, and that's going to be the subject of our next movie.